Sights and Stories, a Global Aussie Journey. I'm just going to give a little bit of time for our regular followers to be able to log on and to get onto the podcast. They don't miss anything important. This is a little bit of a retake. We did this podcast last night, but there were some technical difficulties with the slideshow, so we're giving it another go to make sure that people can watch the slideshow. So I hope everyone's ready to explore another great site in Japan. I'll just wait a little bit longer so that people can click on, and then we'll get started. If you missed the previous episode, you missed the overview of Tokyo, or the first season of podcasts on major attractions at Tokyo. So if you missed out on that one, be sure to go back to either Twitch, Spotify, or YouTube to see that that podcast. It'll give you some great ideas and strategies on how you can tackle an enormous city with so many attractions, but you'll get to see the highlights if you go to that podcast. So I think we'll just get things underway now. I've given a little bit of time for people to log on. So g'day to everyone who has joined me tonight from around the world. Like I said, welcome to Sights and Stories, a Global Aussie Journey, the podcast where a qualified historian with a passion for travel and the past will take you to the world's most iconic locations. Each episode will explore not just the sites, but the stories behind them. I want to give you expert historical knowledge and practical tips to assist travel plans, and along the way, make your experiences to sites much more memorable when at the destination. Today, we're going to continue our travel series on Japan. Let's go to one of the 17 World Heritage sites in Kyoto. We're going to go to a place called Nijo Castle, or Nijo-jo, a formal imperial villa of Japan. During the podcast, there will be plenty of opportunities to ask questions. Just put them in the chat and I will stop along the way and answer those questions. I'll also dedicate the last 5 to 10 minutes of the podcast to any questions you may have regarding the site or general questions about going to Kyoto. If you want to privately message me, you can write an email and send it to sightsandstoriesau@gmail.com. This link is in the chat and also on the YouTube slideshow presentation that will be published following the podcast. Please also remember to press the follow button. That gives me encouragement and lets me know that you're enjoying the podcast. So sit back and enjoy. Let's get a fascinating insight into Nijo Castle, discovering both its history and the reasons for visiting the site while in Tokyo. First, let's talk about history before architecture. Kyoto has long been an important capital of Japan. In 794, Emperor Kanmu called the site Heian-kyo, meaning peace. During the Heian period, it became known as Kyoto, or capital city. The city was actually the site of the emperor's imperial palace until 1869. I'll talk more about that imperial palace at a future podcast. Nijo Castle began to be constructed in 1601 when Ieyasu, the founder of the Tokugawa shogunate, commanded daimyos from western Japan to construct a residence for him in the capital. The castle was completed in 1603. I've spoken about the nature of the Tokugawa shogunate in past podcasts, but I'll give you a brief overview now. But if you're interested in a more in-depth explanation of this period of Japanese history, I'd encourage you to check out my past podcast on the Tokyo Imperial Palace, because that gives you a lot more information about the Tokugawa. The Tokugawa ruled Japan for over 250 years. It was an extraordinary time when Japan basically shut its doors to outside influence, a time when a strict feudal society existed and the shogun ruled Japan and the emperor was a figurehead. In fact, Nijo Castle was a place where Ieyasu announced he was shogun before the feudal lords, the daimyo of Japan. For 3 days, he invited the royal courtiers and daimyo to the castle for a grand party and feast to proclaim the start of his rule. Hence, it's a site where the Tokugawa shogunate actually began. The Tokugawa would move the capital of Japan to Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo, during their rule. But Nijo-jo then became the official residence of the shoguns when they visited the ancient capital of Kyoto. When the shogun was not in Kyoto, samurai guards were garrisoned at the castle to make sure it was kept safe and in good order for when the shogun did visit the ancient capital. In 1614, the castle was the headquarters for Ieyasu when he subsequently defeated opposition at the siege of Osaka Castle. This is another site I intend on talking about in future podcasts. Osaka is a major city today. You can reach it in about 15 minutes by Shinkansen, by bullet train, about half an hour by a normal train. So it's not that far away. But there was a major castle there that was ruled or under the control of the Toyotomi family, and they rebelled against the shogun. And so Ieyasu had to basically build up his strategy and his army at Nijo Castle, and from there he basically led the army to the site of Osaka Castle and defeated his enemy before returning back to Nijo-jo or Nijo Castle after the victory. And so it's an important staging point for his consolidation of power during the Tokugawa period as well. Osaka Castle, by the way, you can visit it, but just be assured the difference between Osaka Castle and the castle we're talking about today, Nijo Castle, is Osaka's a complete reproduction. It was actually destroyed during World War II, whereas Nijo-jo is an original castle. Kyoto was not bombed as significantly as Osaka was. That city was pretty much leveled during the war. So in 1624, the third Tokugawa shogun, Iemitsu, conducted a large-scale renovation of Nijo-jo to ensure it was prepared for an imperial visit by the emperor to the site in 1626. So he built a new tower and a reception palaces. They were completed at this time to ensure that visit went well. In 1750, the original 5-story keep, or tenshu, was unfortunately destroyed by fire from a lightning strike. And in 1867, the 15th Tokugawa shogun, whose name was Yoshinobu, summoned his officials residing in Kyoto to the site. Inside the Ninomaru Goten Palace, he announced the end of the Tokugawa rule. So thus, the site of Nijo Castle ushered in both the beginning and ushered out the end of Tokugawa rule. So anyone who's interested in Tokugawa rule and wants to know more about that history, you definitely have to go to the site just for that reason alone, because of the extraordinary history connected to Nijo Castle. It's why today you still see school children regularly going to excursion to this site, because it's a significant historical place in Japanese history. The castle was also the place where the Meiji Restoration era began, with a return to emperor rule. So in 1868, a council of state was formed at the castle by the emperor. Therefore, if you're interested in Meiji Restoration history, this is also a site connected to the start of the development of modern Japan. So it is an incredibly important site for Japanese history. In 1884, the castle became an imperial villa for the emperor, and then in 1915, Emperor Taisho held a banquet at the site to celebrate his ascendancy to the throne. This was attended by imperial officials, foreign dignitaries, and the Japanese Prime Minister. A number of new buildings were added to the castle for the festivities in the area of the Seiryoin Goten. However, they were all dismantled, with the exception of the South Gate. That's the only piece of architecture left from Emperor Taisho's changes to the site. The site was eventually opened up to the public in 1940 and designated as a World Heritage Site in 1994. So the site is over 400 years old today, and as I said, it's original. All right, so I'll just have a look. I don't think anyone's posted any questions yet, but just remember, you can post questions. I have got a suggestion there to hydrate, so I'll make sure I do that and have a bit of a drink before we move on into the architecture. Done. Okay, so now we're going to talk about architecture at the site. So When you arrive at the site, you're most likely going to see the Tonnen Sumi Yagura, or southeast watchtower, separated by a beautiful moat. Originally, there were watchtowers on all corners of the castle complex. However, in 1788, there was a fire that destroyed two of them. So today, only this tower and the southwest tower exist. You can get some great pictures of the watchtower and the moat before entering the site, so I'd suggest you do that before you walk to the entrance. You might notice windows set in the tower. They were meant for dropping stones and for archers to attack enemies who dared to come in to try and attack the castle. So this was definitely built, the site was definitely built to defend the shogun. Okay. Next, as you walk past that watchtower, you'll be able to walk towards the entrance to the castle. You're going to be met by an impressive Higashi Ottoman gate. The original gate was 2 stories high. However, at one stage it was altered for a visit by the emperor so that no one was able to look down upon the emperor from above, because emperors are considered divine, they're considered gods. So the gate was then restored back to its 2-story height after his visit, and the current gate dates back to 1662, so well over 300 years old. The ticket counter is located near this gate, nearby, so once you've bought your tickets, you can walk across the bridge and through the gate. So it's a very, again, a nice photo opportunity. Somebody's just asked how deep the moat is. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure how deep it is. I know that it's quite deep because you can't see the bottom of it, so it would be quite deep. But off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you an answer for that one. So beyond the gate, once you walk through the gate, you're taking some nice photos. On your right side, you will see the office area with a souvenir store and bathrooms, and we'll talk more about that later on. If you turn left, once you go through the gate, you should get to another impressive gateway called the Karamon Gate. This gateway was originally part of the Fushima Castle. It was moved to the present site in 1625 and 1626. This is designated to be an impressive. This is designed to be an impressive gateway that leads to the Nino-Moro Garden Palace. It has a beautiful golden cable, and it is ornately decorated with magnificent carvings of cranes, pine, bamboo, and plum blossoms, symbolizing longevity. The carved lions are designed to protect the palace, and unlike other sites that have a copper roofing, like the Meiji Shrine, for instance, this gate has a cypress bark roof. It is absolutely beautiful to see, and it's definitely one of the places where you want to take a photo while you're visiting the site. So after you walk through that gate, you're then going to get to see the main palace. Okay, you're going to see pretty much the highlight of this site. You're going to see the Nino-Maru Garden Palace. And the Nino-Moro Garden Palace has 6 interconnected buildings with 33 rooms and over 800 tatami mats located within it. This is only part of the architecture. This is the only part of the architecture that dates from the early Edo period and is designed as a national treasure. So the inside is highly decorated with paintings. So as a result, the palace also has important cultural property status. So unfortunately, you cannot take photographs within the actual rooms of what I'm about to describe, but there is a way around it so that you can make sure that you get some good memories of visiting this palace. But I'm going to explain what you'll see when you go into the palace and how it's designed to be propaganda really for the Tokugawa shogunate. So let's go through the rooms and see the paintings attached to them. So first, you'll see the Tozamorai, which consists of 8 chambers, including the Ichi-no-ma, the Ninoma, and the Sen-no-ma, or first, second, and third rooms. Here, visitors can see large paintings featuring a bamboo grove and tigers. Tigers are meant to show strength and power. In this case, the authority of the Tokugawa. This is meant to impress feudal lords or the daimyo who used the space as waiting rooms before seeing the shogun. Visitors will then move towards the shikadai or the reception room. Now this is where the daimyo would present gifts and any messages to the shogun. So daimyo would meet the senior counselors here, and basically what they'll see in terms of decoration is that there's pine trees in the pictures, which are meant to show everlasting prosperity connected to the shogunate. Next, as you make your way through the palace, you'll encounter the Ihoroma. This is where the feudal lords would personally meet the shogun. The shogun would have sat in the first room facing south. It has it's raised above the second room where daimyo would be placed when meeting with the shogun. So the first room where the shogun was seated had huge paintings of pine trees and birds of prey, and they were meant to basically convey prosperity and authority. The second room was decorated with a tranquil scene of pine trees and peacocks, and above the paintings a screen showing phoenix birds to convey a sense of freedom. So this was all about propaganda. On the one hand, it was suggesting that the Tokugawa was strong, that they were going to make Japan a very prosperous nation. And then on the other flip coin, the paintings where the daimyo were kneeling before their lord were designed to basically say, well, you're free to make, you're free to make suggestions. You do have a sense of freedom under the Tokugawa. So it's meant to put them at a little bit of ease, I suppose. So it's excellent propaganda, visual propaganda, as guests walked into this room to meet the shogun. So next, after you visit these rooms, the visitor would walk to what's called the Kuroshoin. These were the shogun's private meeting room, and this is where basically he would meet his senior advisors. The walls show red plum blossoms and cherry trees. The cherry blossoms represent the fleeting nature of life and beauty. That's why they're seen as being very important and representative of life in general. So you will basically get to see them. And there's also scenes of some frolicking waterfowl and running water, and they're there to provide a calming atmosphere so that when the shogun was meeting with his inner circle, his most trusted advisors, they could meet in a way that would convey that he values their opinion, but at the same time there's a realization that life is fleeting, and that they've got to make good decisions together as a group. So this is where he would meet his inner advisors. Only the most senior officials would ever see this room. Okay, you will then walk to the furthest end of the palace. It's called the Shirashoin, and this is where this was the shogun's sitting room and bedroom. So this wasn't a place to show authority, but rather it was a private setting for the shogun and his family. So as such, the paintings include mountain ranges with wild flowers and birds. It's meant to give a relaxing feel. So this is, no one would have seen this apart from the shogun, his family, and their attendants. Maybe some senior advisors, but very few people indeed. In the last part of a walking tour through this palace, you're going to encounter the imperial messengers' rooms at the back of the Tozamurai. And these rooms are decorated with maple trees, birds, flowers, and cypresses. This room was a waiting area for the messenger prior to his meetings with the shogun. Hopefully I've been able to paint a picture of the extraordinary artwork that is basically there at the site. Okay, so while you're walking around the palace, I've also got to let you know that you will be asked to take off your shoes before you walk through it. That's normal. It's a way of protecting the heritage that is there, the extraordinary history of Japan. So you'll be asked to take off your shoes, and while you're in your socks and you're walking around, you'll notice something very interesting about the floorboards. They'll be cold, so make sure you, particularly in winter and autumn, you'll want to make sure that you wear some nice socks. But while you're walking around, you might actually notice the floorboards squeaking a little bit. People often say that they sound like the song of a nightingale. Now, it's caused by clamps moving against nails driven into the wooden beams supporting the floor. Now, some people believe that it was a deliberate design to alert security to the presence of intruders. Others suggest it was unintended. It was just an unintended consequence of the floor construction. So regardless of whether it was or wasn't made for intruders, it's a very interesting feature of the palace, which you can enjoy while you're walking around the rooms. I'll just have a look at the moment, see if there's any questions. Just going to go see. I don't think we've got any questions at the moment. If you do have any questions regarding the palace, please put them in there. I'll move on from the palace. So once you've done the palace, you've gone through it, once you exit, you'll turn right at the exit and you'll make your way through the Ninomaru garden. Now, before you enter the garden, you'll see some very impressive large hanging bells. These bells were used to inform the city of Kyoto of fires and other emergencies, so they served a very important civic role. Fires were incredibly devastating and could cause a lot of harm when most of the buildings were built of wood in these cities, so they were a very important safety feature of Kyoto. You can have a look at them. And then once you've looked at them, you'll go into the garden. It was designed by Kobori Enshu for the imperial visit in 1626 that we've already spoken about, where the Tokugawa made some adjustments to the site. During that visit, the emperor was shown this garden. Now in the centre, Mount Hurai, a place where a legendary hermit lived with miraculous powers, that features in the centre of the pond. So it's meant to be a miniature Mount Hurai. There is also, it's meant to actually symbolise paradise, what paradise looks like. On either side of it, there are two islands that are meant to represent crane and turtle, and these are both creatures that are meant to be metaphors for longevity. So yet again, the Tokugawa are even using garden design to show that they are in firm control and that their reign is going to last a long time. It's an incredibly beautiful, relaxing setting, walking by the pond and having a look at how the rocks are placed. If you're there in winter, you'll also see the cycad trees, otherwise known as Japanese sago palms, in the garden, covered with sheets of rice straw to protect the trees from the cold climate. The sheets of rice straw are actually called komo. If you check out the YouTube slideshow, you'll be able to see pictures of this interesting feature of the garden. So next, you will walk over to the Honmaru East Bridge. If you look into the moat's water, you'll be likely to see hundreds and hundreds of koi fish. Very large fish. They're there, and often you see people feeding them or taking pictures of them. So take the opportunity to do so. And before you walk over the bridge, also have a look at how it's defended by the Honmaru Yuguramon Gate, and get a nice picture there. It's basically the gateway into the second palace at the site. Okay, the Honmaru Goten Palace, which is just beyond the gate, has only recently been opened up to visitors. It was built between 1790 and 1849, being moved to the site in 1893 from the Kyoto Imperial Palace. So it was not there for as long as the other palace that we just spoke about. The Honmaru Goten Palace played an important role as one of the facilities of the Imperial Villa, which was visited by Emperor Meiji and his Empress, and Emperor Taisho and Emperor Showa when they were crown princes. So it's still considered an important cultural property, but it's more connected to probably the early Meiji period, because it was moved to the site in the 1890s, as I said before. So once you've visited the Honmaru Goten Palace, you then get to walk to the corner of the garden to the base of the keep tower. Now, originally, as I said before, a 5-storied keep tower was located here. It originally came from Nijo Castle, but as I stated earlier, in 1750 the tower was struck by lightning and it burned down. So now all that remains are the stone ramparts on which the tower stood. From here, you should be able to get magnificent views of the site. If you're coming in autumn, you'll be able to see the red and yellow foliage on the trees, and you'll get some beautiful photos. So if you check out the slideshow, you'll be able to see some photos that are taken in autumn. The only thing is there are a set of stairs to get up to the Tenshu, up to the base of the tower. So it's maybe not that great if you've got mobility issues. That will be one area of the site that you may have troubles accessing. But again, check out the YouTube link with the podcast to see some great photos of the site from standing on top of the Tenshu. One can just imagine how big and how tall that tower would have been, even by just walking up to the base. It gives you a sense of how well defended the site would have been for the shogun. As you descend the Tenshu, you're now going to walk across the Honmaru West Bridge, and then you're going to turn right and make your way along a beautiful garden path towards the Kita Nakashikiri Mon Gate. From here, you'll be able to get some excellent photos from across the moat, looking back at the stone walls and the bridge that you just walked across leading into the Honmaru Goten Palace. There are toilets also located around here, so if you need to make that all-important stop, they are there for you to relieve yourself. If you check out the photos I've taken of this spot on my YouTube link, you'll be able to see the beautiful yellow and red foliage of autumn again, and the wonderful photos that you can take amongst the old architecture at the site. So check that out. Because you'll see a nice photo in particular of the red foliage overlooking castle walls and the Honmaru West Bridge. So once you pass that garden path, you'll then come to the Kita Nakashikiri Mon Gate, which was built around 1626. It was an important defensive gate which guarded the approach to the palace, and it's very unusual in that the roof of the rear side extends outwards. It is called a Uzumimon, or embedded gate, because of the earth located above the gate and the surrounding walls. So it's quite unusual. Take some photos of it as you pass underneath it. Once you pass through the gate, you'll be able to enter the Seiryu Garden. This was the original location of buildings for the castle guards in the Edo period, and it was transformed into a garden during the Meiji period. It was designed in 1965. It currently has 2 tea houses, 1,000 carefully arranged stones, and lawns designed along mainly western gardens. It was also the site of Emperor Taisho's enthronement banquet that we spoke about earlier. So the buildings used for the occasion have been subsequently dismantled, except for that south gate, which I mentioned earlier to you. Before you exit the garden, you will come across the Kita Ottoman or North Gate. It was located across the road from the Shogun's deputy in Kyoto. It may date back to 1603 or possibly rebuilt during the imperial visit of 1626. It is 6 metres shorter than the Higashi Ottoman Gate. That's the one you originally entered the site through. But the depth and the height are exactly the same. It also has windows for arches and boulder dropping holes for defence of the site. So it's very similar in appearance, like I said, to the Higashi Ottoman Gate that you would have entered the site through when you first got there. So that's pretty much the architecture at the site. And again, if you look at the YouTube pictures, you'll be able to get a sense of how beautiful the gardens are. But I might just stop there for a little bit and get a chance to answer anyone's questions relating to Nijo-jo or Nijo Castle. Are there any questions out there that people would like answered? I might just go through a couple. One is, how long would you spend at the site? I would recommend at least 2 hours, possibly 3, to go through this site. 2 hours will make it a comfortable, relaxing walk around the gateways, around the in through the palace, and into the gardens. And it'll give you plenty of opportunities to take photos, which is what you want to get there for. You want to see, you want to be able to take plenty of nice photos amongst the traditional architecture of Nijo-jo. So I would recommend 2 hours and extend it to 3. The only reason I'd extend it to 3 is because at the end you'll want to stop at the souvenir shop. And the reason you'll want to stop at the souvenir shop is because, like I said before, you can't take photos in the palace. And the artwork there is just extraordinary. So you'll want to have some sort of copies of what the artwork looks like so that you can recall that later on. So I would recommend stopping at the souvenir shop and buying yourself a guidebook, which will contain copies of all of those tremendous artworks that I was speaking about earlier. So the guidebook from memory costs around about 800 yen. It's not that expensive. And you'll be able to get that and keep that as a memory of visiting the palace, which is, like I said, quite extraordinary because it is the beginning and the end of the Tokugawa rule, and with all the nice pictures inside, you'll want to have copies of it. So I'd recommend about 3 hours, but the great thing about Nijo-jo is it's so close to public transport. It's so close to a train station. Now, Kyoto is a very busy city. It's a city where you can easily get stuck in traffic. A lot of tourists, they don't realise how big the city is and how hard it can be to get to places, particularly by buses. So it's not unusual at some tourist sites that we will cover during the podcast series, where you can basically enter a bus and you'll be, shoulder to shoulder. It'll be an absolutely packed bus. It might actually take you, over half an hour to get onto one of those buses, and then the bus will slowly make its way through the city to different locations. So buses can be tremendously slow in Kyoto as a form of transport, and yet some places you can only access really using buses because they're not close to train stations, to eki. But this site is next to a train station, so it's easily accessible. While I said it's about a 2 to 3 hour visit, the great thing is you can turn up by train and then you can leave pretty fast on the train again and get to another part of the city and be able to enjoy something else. So I'd recommend 2 to 3 hours. In fact, I would recommend that you get there first thing in the morning. It opens around about 8:45 in the morning and it closes at around about 5 p.m. Now, saying that, the site will not allow you to enter after 4 o'clock in the afternoon because they believe that it takes at least an hour to visit the site. So they won't let you in after 4 o'clock. So you want to get in there earlier than that if you go in the afternoon. But I would recommend going in the morning. And the reason for that is because, like I said before, a lot of tours and school excursions take place at the site. So it's not unusual to see busloads of children come into the site. And so you want to beat them to the site and you want to be able to get some photos without lots of people there. So I would recommend coming first thing in the morning. Catch a train from Kyoto Station. It's only a few stops from Kyoto Station, heading north through the city. And the site is only like a couple of 100 meters from the train station and you'll be there at the entrance. Get there first thing in the morning, check it out for a couple of hours. By the time you're finished, you'll see lots more people starting to come through the gates and you can then go and enjoy something else in Kyoto. But, you would have had a very relaxing visit. So I would recommend 2 to 3 hours and go in the morning. Okay. I've got another couple of questions there. How tall is the castle? It's not the actual castle itself. It would have been a lot taller in its heyday because it would have had that 5-story keep on the on the base, the stone base that I spoke of before. So it would have been incredibly tall, but unfortunately that's not there anymore. So you're only going to be looking at the gateways that are pretty much the tallest structures at the site, and roughly about 10 meters, just under 10 meters or so. They're still incredibly impressive. They're much bigger than a normal standard house. So you're going to get beautiful architecture, but it's not going to be exceptionally tall because the keep no longer exists. If you want to see a castle keep, there are some other castles to visit near Kyoto, which I'll talk about shortly. So actually, I could talk about it now. So Nijo-jo is the only castle in Kyoto. Okay, there is no other castle in the actual city. This was the site of the castle. So it is an incredibly wonderful place to go. I would suggest if you've only got one day in Kyoto, you might not go to Nijo-jo because there are some other fantastic sites as well. Unless you are a history buff and you love the Tokugawa period and you want to know everything about it, then this is the most historical site in the city for that. If you've got 2 to 3 days in Kyoto, you definitely want to go to Nijo-jo Castle. Okay, if you've only got one, there's probably some other sites that you want to hit because it takes about 2 to 3 hours to visit the sites properly. The other castles that you can visit, apart from Nijo-jo, there is a castle further north of the city of Kyoto called Hakone Castle. Hakone Castle is it's a small castle, but it's an original castle as well. So it is totally original from the Edo period and a beautiful site to go to, and not many tourists go up there. So it's a good one to go to if you don't want to have the hustle and bustle of the crowd and see a more traditional Japan, I suppose, in a traditional setting. The other places to go to see castles near Kyoto is Osaka Castle, which I mentioned before. But remember, Osaka Castle is a reproduction. It's a beautiful castle, don't get me wrong. You'll be able to walk up the keep and you'll be able to get this magnificent view of the city and really get a feeling of what a castle was like, how it was defended by walking up the keep, the reproduced keep. And it does contain a very interesting museum within it, which is well worth checking out to learn about the Tokugawa period in particular. So it's well worth a visit, but it is a reproduction because Osaka was totally leveled during World War II by bombing. So unfortunately, it is not original. Now, there is an original castle, which isn't far from Kyoto, which you could definitely travel by Shinkansen and get there within just over an hour. And that is Himeji Castle. And Himeji Castle is the most, I would say, arguably the best castle in Japan. It is so impressive. It is so large. It's totally original. So none of it, was reproduced. It was not damaged during World War II. And it is a magnificent site to visit. And it gives you a real sense of walking through a castle. So if you want to visit a fully intact Japanese castle close to Kyoto, I would highly recommend that you visit Himeji. I think it's an absolutely stunning site, and I will do a future podcast on all the castles that I've just mentioned because I'm a bit of a castle buff and I love them too. So I will go through each of those castles, but they'll be in future podcasts. But Nijo-jo is definite must visit within Kyoto. Is it a place to take small children? Someone asks. Definitely. This is definitely a site that is children friendly. I've mentioned that there are toilets located throughout the site. So there's some at the entrance. There's also some halfway through the actual tour as you go through the gardens. So there's plenty of stops in terms of toilets, which I know children would probably need, particularly young ones. So you have those rest stops. It's a very tranquil place to go. So, the palace is great in terms of being able to, walk through it. I think you can really paint a picture to children of what a castle is and what it would have been like in traditional Japan. I think you can get that by going through this site. Now that, in particular, now that you know the history of the site and some of the architecture connected to it, you can explain to children as you go through what the individual pieces of architecture and the places were designed to do. To show the Tokugawa as strong rulers, to show how impressive they were and how people were to respect them. You get a sense of the prosperity and the the power of the Tokugawa just by the decorations, the artworks, the extraordinary gateways. You also get the sense of how a castle was defended by the moats, by the use of stone walls everywhere, and the windows and the watchtowers, and so it's an excellent place to teach them about Japanese castles and how they were designed to defend against the enemy. So I think it's a really great site, and if you've got children that are into art and they're creative, just showing them some of those artworks through the palace it'll be an incredible experience for them. And they also get to stretch their legs around the gardens, so they get to run around a little bit if they want to, and they get to experience the site. They can run up the stairs to get up to the tenshu or the base, to the keep. So there's opportunities for them to stretch their legs as well if they're little. So I would recommend this for any children. Who, if you want to take children to the site, it is a fantastic place to visit with them. I've got another question there. Thank you. Thank you. There's someone who's just written there that there's nice photos. That's great to know. There's another question there. Are there any boat rides on the moat? No, unfortunately, this is not a castle that will have boat rides. There are boat rides at some of the other castles I just mentioned, particularly Osaka. There are some boat rides connected to that castle, but not to this one. There's no boat rides on the moats. So you won't get to experience that here, but you do get to walk by them and you get to see the beautiful koi fish. So that's something. Another question I get quite often is, can you visit the site on a budget? Definitely, you can visit the site on a budget. It's not terribly expensive to get into. It's not like it's going to absolutely break the bank in terms of going there. In particular, it's about 1,300 yen for adults, 400 yen for high school students, and 300 yen for elementary school students. So it's not going to cost you an enormous amount. You can also buy English guides, audio guides there. You can rent them for around about 600 yen. But honestly, there's enough signage around there that you won't need them. And you could easily do the site. Now that you've listened to me talk, you'll be able to understand exactly what each of the parts of the architecture are without having to put something in your ears. So I recommend if you're coming with children, you can talk to them about it rather than now listening to an audio guide, which sometimes can be a little bit boring. So you can also get private guides and tours at the site, but I don't think you'd need to do that. Like I said, there's plenty of signage. It's very easy to walk from one part to the next within the site without missing anything because it's got very clear designated pathways. So you're not going to need to worry about that. So it is cheap. It's not, it's not free, but it's definitely a site that you can go to that's not going to cost you an enormous amount of money. So it's, if you're on a budget and you're thinking about sites that you can go to experience traditional Japan and not spend an enormous amount, then Nijo-jo is definitely a place to visit. The other thing I get asked quite often is, what do you find is the best thing about visiting this site? I think the best thing about this site is that it taps into both traditional Japanese history, the Tokugawa and the Meiji period. I think that's really, being a historian, I might be a bit biased, but that's what I think is great about the site. I also think it's just the architecture and the beautiful paintings within the palace. I think they're extraordinary. And I think from an architectural perspective, it's one of the most beautiful sites you can go to in terms of that. So there's a couple of reasons why I think it's really great to visit the site. Somebody also asked me, how does it compare to other sites in Kyoto? Now, it is true that there are an enormous amount of sites to choose from in Kyoto. This is one of 17 World Heritage Sites in the city. That gives you an idea of how cultural and how beautiful the city of Kyoto is. It's very lucky that this city was not destroyed during World War II. Basically, the Secretary of War, the US Secretary of War, tried very hard to make sure that this site would not be destroyed. His name was Stimson. He basically, there was studies suggesting which cities should be bombed in Japan during World War II. And they decided at one stage that Kyoto was actually going to be the site of a nuclear bomb. They were going to blow the place apart. But Stimson stuck up for Kyoto. He'd visited Kyoto in the 1920s and he knew about the cultural importance of this city. And he basically appealed to the president, Harry Truman, and he said, you can't destroy Kyoto. It is so important as a city. And so it was decided not to drop the nuclear bomb on Kyoto, and instead it was dropped on Nagasaki. So the second bombing, it avoided the second bombing. But as such, we've got this beautiful city, and it is so true that there are so many places you could visit. And we'll go on future podcasts and have a look at some of them. There's some extraordinary shrines. There's some extraordinary Buddhist temples, extraordinary shopping experiences, and, walks that you can take. There's so much to see in Kyoto. But as I said before, I believe that this site is one of the ones that you should visit, and it's often overlooked, and it shouldn't be. Nijo-jo is particularly important for Japanese history, and you can see that when you have school children turning up to this site. It's obviously very important to them to know this history. So I would recommend that if you have a few days in Kyoto, like I said before, definitely put this site on your travel plans. If you've only got one day, I'm going to suggest a couple of other things, which I'll go through in future podcasts. I'm going to suggest a bit of a walking tour that you can take, and also a visit to a shrine or a Buddhist temple. But, definitely don't discount it. If you're there for a few days, you want to make sure that you go to Nijo-jo, okay? Make sure you do that. I've also got another question there. Based on what days of the week is the site open. Generally on Tuesdays it's not open, okay? So don't go there on Tuesdays, and in particular it won't be open during New Year's, okay? So New Year's is something that typically the site will close down for, but I would check out the site's website because it lists dates from year to year as to when Nijo-jo will be open. So make sure you check them out before going, because the last thing you want to do is get to the site and it's shut, right? So no matter how convenient it is, you don't want it to be shut. So just check out online to make sure it's open, because there are some festival dates and some important days of the year where it will shut. But for the most part, it's open throughout most of the week. What days are best to visit? In any site in Kyoto, the best days to visit these sort of places are during the weekdays. Weekends can be very popular. However, with Nijo-jo, there are quite a lot of school children that visit the site, and they will come during the weekdays. So I recommend getting in the morning, okay, like I said before. I've got another question there. Does it hold value to revisit? Yeah, I reckon if you have visited it once, the beauty of the site is well worth visiting again. For those of you who have gone there, maybe you didn't take in all of the historical aspects of it the first visit. I know that, there's quite an extraordinary amount of visual propaganda and garden design, which you can miss the first time you visit. So it's well worth going and visiting again so that you can take in more of that. If you've been once before, think about going again. You might actually, now that you've listened to my podcast, hopefully you're able to understand more of the site and take in even more next time round. Is spring the best season to visit? Now, look, this is always a question. What time of the year should I go to Nijo-jo? Nijo-jo is great all times of the year. Now, spring is great because you're going to get blossoms, right? You're going to have some blossoms around the place. Autumn's going to be great because you're going to get that red and yellow foliage, which I've captured for you on the YouTube link and also in the photos that have accompanied the podcast. So, you're going to get those spectacular colours at those times of the year. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't visit during other times of the year. In fact, if you go in summer, just having a walk through the palace will get you out of the heat of the day. So that's a good reason to, go to the site. So I don't think you should discount going at any time of the year. I think one of the best things about Nijo-jo is not just that you can experience the history and the architecture, but I think walking around the gardens gives you a nice relaxing feel to the city. There are plenty of places you can do that, but Nijo-jo is special like that in that, so much of Japan is hustle and bustle and lots of crowds and lots of people everywhere. If you're somebody who just wants to get away and have a bit of a rest from that and you want to explore some Japanese gardens, Nijo-jo is great for that. So it's a great area just to get some fresh air and to be away from all those crowds that you may have experienced at other sites in Kyoto or elsewhere in Japan. So I'd highly recommend that you visit at any time of the year. It doesn't matter. They're all great times of the year to go to Nijo-jo. It's an attraction, an all-year attraction. Okay, definitely worth visiting. Are there any other questions out there? Let me just see. I think I've answered the ones that are there. I just don't want to miss out on any ones, just in case I have. But like I said, I think it's a fantastic site to visit. Architecturally beautiful. Gardens spectacular. And, the artworks are just simply, they're just so impressive. So I think I've answered everyone's questions. I don't think I've missed out on anything. So just remember that I will come back to previewing some other castles down the track. I'll talk to you about Himeji and about Osaka and Hakone later on. I think you'll get a great feel for those sites when I go through those. But Nijo-jo is definitely up there for a castle to visit. So I hope this episode has provided you with insights. Oh, somebody just asked, can you swim in the lake? I wouldn't want to. No, you can't swim in the lake, okay? So don't do that. You'll get in big trouble. No swimming in the lake, and particularly during certain times of the year, you'll absolutely freeze. So you don't want to do that. Good question, though. Funny one at that. Anyway, I hope that this episode has provided you with insights into Nijo-jo, a site connected to the rise and the fall of the Tokugawa and the beginning of the Meiji era. A site that is well worth visiting to see the magnificent artworks and architecture connected to the Ninomuru-goten Palace. And now that you know more about the site and the history, your visit should be more meaningful and memorable. If you want to see pictures of some of the highlights from a visit to Nijo-jo or Nijo Castle, be sure to check out my YouTube video attached to the podcast. Please don't be scared to also press the follow button. This will help you connect with future podcasts. It also means I know I'm doing something right and gives me encouragement to continue exploring Japan with people. So please follow me. And also remember, if you want to connect with me and don't feel comfortable messaging in the chat, just send me an email to sightsandstoriesau@gmail.com. There's one last question that's come in there. Can you still visit in the rain? Absolutely. It's a site that you can visit in the rain. Just make sure you take an umbrella so that you can enjoy the gardens. So yes, you can definitely visit in any type of weather, Nijo-jo. But of course, it's even better when it's sunny and it's a nice bright day. But if it is raining, still worth a visit. You're going to be able to go into all of the buildings that I've mentioned. So anyway, be sure to catch my next episode on Japan. Next time I plan on visiting another interesting part of Kyoto. I think we'll go to one of the famous religious sites, a site that people definitely have on their list when they go to Kyoto. I'll leave it there for now. I don't want to give too much away. But until then, I wish you all well and safe travels to all those abroad. Catch you later, mate.